Oh, hey YouTube, I didn't hear you come in there. I'm your host, Disorderly Cone, and welcome to Groove Builders. Today, we're going to be going into the literary world of Middle Earth while we look at their depiction of Moby Dick. Let's get down to the workbench and check out the package.
Alright, Groove Builders, welcome to the workbench. We have our Middle Earth Moby Dick model and some pretty awesome book sculpture packaging. On the back, we have a little bit of literature about Moby Dick. Then we have that QWERTY code that we can scan to get a 360 view of the model if we need it. Just below that, some instructions on how to build Moby Dick. And then at the very bottom, a view of a future model we're going to build, the Old Man in the Sea. Very cool. Let's go ahead and open this up. We have our instructions, and we have our metal. This metal's pretty cool too, because if you look closely, it has a story etched right in it. Groovers, let's get building. The original story of Moby Dick has been around for quite some time, and no doubt you have probably heard of this infamous whale before. The original story was written in 1851 by Herman Melville, and to be really honest, it didn't do too well in stores. To Mr. Melville, this book would be a total failure, and it was pulled from shelves not long before his death in 1891. But that can't be the end of the story, especially if my grade 5 reading assignment serves me correctly. Like most great art, written or illustrated, Moby Dick would only be fully realized as a great American novel after the artist's death, finding traction in the 20th century. So, what's this book all about? The story of Moby Dick is about a teacher who wants to learn about whaling while making a little bit of money. This man is named Ishmael, and the book follows his adventures on the seas surviving the infamous sperm whale Moby Dick. The story starts with Ishmael meeting his soon-to-be best friend Queequeg in an overcrowded inn. After spending the night listening to Queequeg's stories, the pair end up signing up on the whaling ship Pequod, owned by the famous Captain Ahab. Before leaving on the adventures, a man named Elijah warns them of a terrible fate should Ishmael and Queequeg join Ahab. While provisions are loaded, shadowy figures board the ship. On a cold Christmas day, the Pequod leaves the harbor. When out at sea, the Pequod works in smaller teams to help catch whales. The first team has the chief mate, a 30-year-old named Starbuck, a Nantucket quarter with a realist mentality whose harpooner is Queequeg. Then you have the second mate, Stubb, from Cape Cod, a pretty happy-go-lucky, cheerful kind of guy, and his harpooner is Tashtiego, a proud, pure-blooded Indian from Gayhead. Third team has the third mate, Flask, also known as Martha's Vineyard. He tends to be short and stout, whose harpooner is Dagu, a tall African, now a resident of Nantucket. Eventually, Ahab finally appears on deck and announces he is out for revenge on the white whale Moby Dick, which had taken his leg from the knee down and left him with a peg leg fashioned from a whale's jawbone. Ahab directs the ship to the Pacific Ocean via southern Africa. One afternoon, as Ishmael and Queequeg are weaving a mat, Tashtiego sights a sperm whale. 5 previously unknown men appear on the deck. They are revealed to be a special crew selected by Ahab, made to take down Moby Dick. The pursuit is completely unsuccessful. One day, Stubb kills a sperm whale, and that night, Fleece, the cook, prepares him a rare whale steak. Fleece delivers a sermon to the sharks that fight each other to feast on the whale's carcass tied to the back of the ship, saying that it's in their nature to be voracious, but they must overcome it. The whale is prepared, beheaded, and the barrels of oil are tried out. Standing at the head of the whale, Ahab begs it to speak of the depths of the ocean. The next encounter the Pequod would have would be with another whaling ship, the Jeroboam, which not only lost its chief mate to Moby Dick, but also is now plagued with an epidemic. This does not faze Ahab. He is one determined captain. The Pequod and the captain have a few more encounters with ships and whales through the following chapters as they approach the equator. That evening, an impressive typhoon attacks the ship. Lightning strikes the mast, setting the coin and Ahab's harpoon aglow with heat. Ahab talks to the men about the spirit of fire, seeing the lightning as a portrayant of Moby Dick. Starbuck, however, sees the lightning as a warning and feels tempted to shoot the sleeping Ahab with a musket. The next morning, Ahab finds that the lightning has disoriented the compass. Now he has to make a new one out of lace, a maul, and a sailmaker's needle. If you ask me, Groove Builders, not the most reliable compass around. The Pequod is heading southeast towards Moby Dick. The Rachel, another whaling ship, is seen seeking for survivors from one of her whaling boats which had gone missing after fighting Moby Dick. Among the missing is the gardener's young son. Ahab refuses to join in on the search. Next, the Pequod meets the Delight, badly damaged and 5 of her crew left dead by Moby Dick. Her captain shouts that the harpoon which can kill the white whale has yet to be forged. But Ahab flourishes his special lance and once more orders his ship forward. Ahab has a moment of contemplation with Starbuck. Ahab speaks about his wife and child and calls himself foolish for spending 40 years on whaling and claims that he can see his own child in Starbuck's eyes. Starbuck tries to persuade Captain Ahab to go home to Nantucket and meet both their families, but Ahab simply crosses the deck. He was not turning back. On the first day of the chase, Ahab smells the whale. He climbs the mast and sights Moby Dick. He claims the gold coin for himself and orders all the boats to be lowered except for Starbuck's. The whale effortlessly bites Ahab's boat in 2, tossing the captain out and scattering the crew like glitter into the water. On the second day of the chase, Ahab leaves Starbuck in charge of the Pequod, but Moby Dick smashes the 3 boats, hunting him into splinters and tangles their lines. Ahab is rescued, but his ivory leg and Fidel are all lost. Starbuck begs Ahab to go home, but Ahab vows to slay the white whale, even if he has to dive through the globe itself for his revenge. On the third and final day of the chase, Ahab sights Moby Dick at noon and sharks appear in the water. Ahab lowers his boats for the final time, leaving Starbuck again on board. Moby Dick breaches and destroys the first 2 boats. Ahab plants his harpoon in the whale's flank. Moby Dick crushes the whale boat, tossing the men into the water. Only Ishmael is unable to return to the Pequod. He is left behind in the sea, but that's not so bad. He ends up being the only crewman of the Pequod to survive the final encounter. The whale now fatally attacks the ship. The whale returns to Ahab, who stabs him again, but this time the line loops around Ahab's neck, and as the stricken Moby Dick swims away, the captain is drawn with him out of sight. Queequeg's coffin, which he had bought and used as storage a little earlier, comes to the surface, the only thing to escape the vortex when the Pequod sank. For an entire day, Ishmael floats on it, and then the Rachel, still looking for its lost seamen, rescues him. Groove Builders, it's very important for me to say that my depiction of Moby Dick here today was very much a summarization of the story, and if you haven't read it yet, you owe it to yourself to go and pick up a copy and give it a quick read through. There's all kinds of really cool stuff that I really just don't have time to mention here today, but what I can say is I'm very glad that Metal Earth experimented with this kind of model.
Welcome back, Groove Builders. We did it. We built Moby Dick, and I must say, this model looks really neat when complete. All that story etching and all that little bit of detail really pulls together in the end. Let's talk about it a little bit more in construction. The first point that I want to talk about is how difficult it was to get those sails into the right spot. Groovers, for this particular piece, I really recommend pre-bending all of the sails and then kind of lining them up. Once you get them into spot, secure those tabs right away. Then take a second pair of tweezers and manipulate the sails into their spots. That way, you'll find it a lot easier to get everything to where it needs to be. Otherwise, you're going to end up bending a lot of the center posts and it's not going to come out that great. My second point is still to do with the ship. It's the bottom half when you're attaching it together. This is a little bit difficult. You're definitely going to have to apply some force to be able to get that metal into its proper shaping. Just take your time with this piece. Make sure that when you're bending it to form it along with the top part of the metal, that top deck part if you will. That will really help you get that shape you need for the center. Once you get that shape, secure it and lock it in as best you possibly can. Because when you attach it to the base to where the book is, you're going to have to manipulate it even more. So make sure all those connections are really tight and you should be okay. My third point that I want to make is more of a word of caution. Anytime that you're putting any of the detailed pieces onto the book, you want to be very careful not to scratch the metal around it, as it's all etched with that really nice writing. Take your time and try to pre-bend all of your tabs to where they kind of need to be beforehand. This way you run a lower risk of scratching any of that finished metal. Good luck, Groovers! Let's move on to build time. This model really didn't take a whole lot of time for me to build. take just over 3 hours. And I feel like that's going to be about average for everyone building this model. Just make sure not to rush, because anytime you rush, you're definitely going to make little mistakes. And with this model here, it's very easy to make mistakes. And finally, Groove Builders, let's move on to my thoughts. I love all the little bits of detail on this Moby Dick depiction from Metal Earth. Everything from the little storybook etching, the whale, the whaler, the ship, it just pulls together really well on top of this little book. You know, Groovers, you could really think of a whole bunch of books that could be turned into models just like this. Could you imagine a Sherlock Holmes model like that? But nevertheless, this model is awesome, and if you're looking to pick up something with a little bit more detail, I highly recommend it. If you're new to metal model building, I wouldn't necessarily go for this one first, because that ship is a little bit difficult and will give you a little bit of a run for your money. But at the end of the day, Groovers, I highly recommend this model, and I definitely recommend it for anyone's collection. Alright, Groove Builders, that brings us to the end. I had a really good time building Moby Dick with you, and if you guys had a good time, don't forget to press that like button. For more videos like this, hit subscribe as well, as we got all kinds of really cool content coming out in the future. Until next time, Groove Builders, keep building.